Welcome to today's podcast. I'm your host, Mario Apodaca, and today we have a very special guest, Jenny Schroer, and she has an inspiring story to share with us. So, after she experienced a layoff during the pandemic, she transformed her job search by embracing three powerful mindset shifts, and she's here to share her journey with us, the lessons that she's learned, and how these mindset changes can help anyone navigating career transitions. So, thank you for joining us, Jenny. And before we dive into these three mindset shifts, tell us a little bit about yourself, your personal experience, being laid off, how it affected you emotionally and mentally as well.
Yeah, thanks, Mario. First of all, it's great to be talking to you and your listeners. This is a topic I think you and I both feel really strongly about. So I'm glad to share. But I'll tell you what, it was a gut punch. Um, I was just shocked. I felt really demoralized. This had never happened to me before. And it's like, what's going on? I've always been a top performer. My last three jobs came to me. I wasn't even looking for them. And all of a sudden, here I am, not only without a job, but at a time when the whole world was in turmoil and, we didn't know what was going to happen with the employment market. And so it was scary and it was kind of depressing too. So yeah, I sat there and took my moment to feel sorry for myself and feel worried. But if I sit in that space for too long, it's not good. It feeds on itself. So I kind of jumped to dusting off my resume, trying to fix up my work samples and things like that. But despite all the work I was putting into it, it just wasn't working out the way that I, was used to. So it was tough.
Yeah, it's hard. Like I get the mental part of it. Um, as I went through my transition too, I was really like top performer, it's like I'm a professional, you're really good at what you do, like, and then to go through that, it's like, maybe I'm not as good as I thought. I don't know. But it is a gut punch. It's very challenging. So I know that as you were going through this, and I went through your presentation. Thank you for saying that to me earlier. Um, that you during the economic downturn, like this was putting you in a tough position as well. And so I know that you were feeling demoralized. And how do you shift out of that? Like, what were you doing? What was that way that you moved from feeling demoralized to now embracing like these shifts? Because that I think is a roadblock for a lot of people. That's just a huge hurdle to overcome.
Yeah, I think so. One of the things I did was try to reach out to other people. So just starting out with, people like you who are in my own network and just talking to people. But I also came upon some job search groups. We're lucky in this area. We have a couple really good ones. Um, and so I noticed though when I went to those groups, and it was all online then because it was COVID, but I noticed that everybody used the phrase career transition. And at first I thought, oh boy, a euphemism, great, career transition. But the more I listened, the more I came to like that term because it made me think of, and this is the first mindset shift. It's like, you're not an unemployed person.
Mhm.
That has all kinds of negative and scary connotations to it. But really, you're a skilled professional who's looking for their next step. And so, in that sense, career transition kind of maintained self esteem. At the same time, it gives you hope that you're on your way somewhere. It's not like, oh, I'm sitting here in this bad place, but I'm transitioning to something else in my career. And actually, it opens doors because if you're just in a job and then you're trying to find another job, you're following a path. But
Mm.
when the whole thing shuts down and now you've got to start from zero, it really does open opportunities. And I even tried consulting, which is something I always wanted to do and never wanted to like leave the security of a company.
Yeah.
But I tried it and I realized I preferred being with a company, but it was great to have that openness and that experience that I never would have had. I always would have wondered if that could have worked out for me if I hadn't been in this situation.
Yeah. So I know like you went into the realm of consulting, that's kind of like, hey, I'm my own business now, or my own person in that. How did that experience itself just bring that value? I know one of the first things that you talked about in your presentation was like value yourself. Was this something that kind of lifted you a little bit more, or is it something that you were like, I just need to do something?
Both. Yeah. Somebody who I had worked with, she had actually been a consultant at a job I had. And so she was on a project and they needed more people. So I jumped in. I was like, oh, great. This will help me, keep some skills sharp. I'll earn some money. Um, and again, COVID. So it was boring time. So it kept me busy. And so it was good in a lot of ways. But it was also good to say, all right, I've checked that off my list now.
Yeah, yeah. That's an interesting thing because I think what did you learn like the most from that? Like I'm in the process of consulting now, right? And I'm like freedom. I feel like there's this like freedom that comes with it and everything. But I'm also very much an extrovert and I love
Yeah.
like being with people and things like that. And I'm doing it from the safety of my home. But I'm also in the space of like, hey, I'm learning a lot of things in this. And so, what was maybe something that you learned about yourself going into that different space like that?
Yeah. I mean, I learned that I could do it, but I also realized, okay, when you're a consultant, you're your own tech support, you're your own marketing, you're your own administrative assistant. It's like all
Yeah,
this other stuff. And I just want to do the work I like. I like to have the structure of a company. And I'm also pretty risk averse. So the idea of like not knowing where my next job is going to come from, even though I just got laid off from like working for a company, it's still I just wasn't totally comfortable with that as a career path.
yeah, yeah. Awesome. You talked about something, it's the impact of like not settling. And so, what advice would you have for like job seekers? They're struggling with this to maintain this mindset, right? And there's the financial pressures that might
Mhm.
tempt them to just like, I'm going to take the first thing out there and get it right. But I know when you and I had talked previously, you're like, yeah, don't settle, right? And so, why? Why is that such a key thing?
Yeah, I mean, for one thing, I think it comes across in interviews, whether you realize it or not, because I was interviewing for jobs that took me back 10 years in my career, but hey, there were postings. Um, so it's really a better way to flip it around. And it actually took a career coach to help me recognize this. I worked with really great career coach at the Balky Group, Jeff Wunker, and he helped me think through like what do you really like in a job? What do you feel you're good at? What kind of environment do you want to be in? Like all that stuff. And think about what you're good at, what you would be happy doing and feel fulfilled doing, and then work from there. And network into those scenarios rather than saying, oh, this job is posted and I kind of have some skills for it, even though I don't really want to take a step back. So that's the way he helped me to kind of re-envision this.
Yeah, yeah. I hear you. As I had gone through job search and everything, like one of the things I was like, I can do that. But inside, I did not want to do that, you
Yeah.
know? Yeah, I totally feel it because I think there's a lot that can be said for that, because when you first lose your job, there's the desperation of, "I need to get something else." And so I think, unfortunately, a lot of people do settle,
Mhm.
then you end up in a situation that's maybe worse long term, you
Mhm.
know, for your mental well-being and everything, so, yeah.
Yeah. So major caveat there. I mean, I was in a position where I didn't have to find a job right away. And I know not everybody's in that position. So I would say if somebody feels like they're not in a financial position to be able to do that, maybe just take a look at your budget and see what's actually possible for you, and see if maybe you could do some contract work or temp work to kind of hold you over, or something that might not be as, mentally taxing for you, while you take some time to also look for those opportunities that make better long-term sense for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Looking for a job is quite a process in itself, right? It's a lot of work. It takes a lot of time and energy. And you sit there and it's like through the days, and then the rejection emails come, and that can be demoralizing as well. So
Mhm.
I think this gets into more like the second mind shift that you were talking about, right? Is value the process in
Mhm.
what you're doing. So, and there's this point that you made, and I just thought it was really great. Like that a job search isn't just about selling yourself, but rather identifying the employer's needs, right? And I that really spoke to me because as you look through job, listings and everything, it's like, oh, I can do that, but understanding the employer's needs. So, how did that shift in thinking help you, like as you were going through the interview process and everything as well?
Yeah. So, I mean, you know this because you were my manager in an instructional design role. But, what I had done for many years is design learning solutions. And for three different organizations, I worked on consultative selling materials for salespeople. And one of the things they try to get salespeople to realize is, don't go in with the hard sell. Find out what your prospective client actually needs, and then see what kind of solution you're able to provide. And it kind of hit me, oh, I'm working at this as a sales pitch, but it's really a needs analysis.
Mm.
And so I started looking at a job posting as a statement of need. A company saying, we need somebody to
Right.
solve a certain problem for us. And I found that when I did like emails reaching out to prospective employers, or cover letters and interviews, especially, I started focusing that way and talking to them about, tell me more about what you're looking for. I see you post it for this. Tell me what's going on in the organization that's led you to ask for this. And it really just became a conversation where I was listening to them, and then I would have the opportunity to say, oh, well, I think I can help you with that by, and start to offer some solutions. And it felt less like that, oh, I've got to push myself, I got to sell myself, to I'm having a conversation here,
Yeah.
and that was a much different vibe. And the times I did that, I got called back for second interviews.
Yeah, yeah. I love that perspective. I think it's unique going into a lot of interviews. I think we prep in the traditional way,
Mhm.
it's like I did the prepping. I would sit there with my wife and tell me about a time, right? She would ask me questions and I go through the thing. And yes, we do that. But I love kind of flipping the script a little bit here, right? Doing that needs analysis because the interview then works both ways in
Mhm.
a lot of ways, right? And the employer gets insight into how you're thinking and how you would approach the position as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And you get to find out, is this the right job for you? Because you're interviewing them too.
Right. So this really helped you understand, like, is this a fit for the both of us?
Yeah.
Yeah. Was there anything that you came across and you were like, I'm done, like, after this interview process, like, I don't wanna go any further down the line.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there were situations like that where I thought either like the work environment didn't seem right, or I had one place I interviewed. They wanted me to basically design an entire e-learning module and give it to them as part of the application process, and I'm thinking, I don't want to be giving away free work here. It went beyond a work sample. So
Yeah,
that told me something though about that employer.
yeah, yeah, and I've seen that a lot on LinkedIn when people are applying for jobs and they're like, hey, they want you to go through and create a thing, right?
Mhm.
And people are saying they should be compensated for that thing they create because it's ultimately solving a solution.
Yeah.
I can, I'm like, I won't go there.
Mhm.
I don't do that. So what was the one thing like coming out of this that you would say when you're looking at how you would value the process itself, right? And this is something I think is really key because a lot of people they don't see as results immediately,
Mhm.
right? They feel like they go back to that first desperation mode and then settle, right? So there's something to be said about the process in making the shift of how you are thinking through this and how it works. So, what did you do to encourage yourself along the way or to keep your spirits up? Because sometimes it all doesn't always work out.
Mhm.
I think it would.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm a cautious optimist in that respect. It's just kind of how I am, but also I'm very into process. I like to put everything into a process. And so that part felt natural to me, but I can see where it wouldn't for everyone. And it's hard, especially when you are feeling that pressure to have an outcome.
Mhm.
But you have to go through certain steps to get there. And part of it is you putting the work in and putting the thought in, but also being true to yourself. Because if you're following, you can throw darts at the virtual job board all day and hope something sticks. But are you really going to be happy in that job? And is that going to serve you well? Or are you going to be turning around and looking for another job a year from now or 6 months from now? So I think just looking at the big picture, trying to keep that in mind can keep you from getting sucked into those moments where you're like, oh, I just need to get a job.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's important. You make a good point, right? Stepping back and always keeping the big picture in mind. We're on
Mhm,
this journey, and it seems like every little thing is a big thing at times, but sometimes you just step back, breathe, know where your end goal is going to be, and the steps you're taking eventually get you there. Like trust the process, right?
mhm.
So I take it that this was really a moment of growth for you. And,
Yeah.
it's interesting because I know we're both in our professional careers, right? And you're established in how you do things and what you do, and sometimes growth doesn't come uh, from all the successes. It comes a lot of times from the hardships and the challenges.
Mhm,
So I know you talked about embracing growth opportunities, and you mentioned that, hey, we could be like experts in our own field, but we're novices in career transitions. And I really like that because that means you still have some learning to do, right? And so how did you balance the learning curve? And then also what advice would you give to others?
mhm. Yeah, I mean, that helped with the self-esteem bit too, because I realized, I'm used to just being out there doing a job. I'm not an expert in finding a job. And things have changed a lot since the last time I did have to go out cold like this and find a job. So, in those types of situations, it makes sense to ask for help. I mean, if you think about any area of your life, if something happens with my car, I'm not going out there to fix it myself. I don't know the first thing about cars. So I would call in an expert. So why not do that with job search? And like I said, there are free groups out there. We have a great one here in the greater Cincinnati area, sponsored by a local library. So there are things for people who maybe can't afford a career coach, but I kind of layered up and did both
Yeah.
because I wanted that one-on-one touch too that you get from a career coach. But yeah, it's great to feel productive in the sense that you're learning these skills, and some of these skills serve you not only in the job search, but they're going to make you a better employee in that next role. I was able to learn a little more about networking and get comfortable with that in a way that helped me make connections that in my current job now, when I need a service, I think, oh, I'm going to call this person I met, and see what kinds of programs they offer, if they can point me to somebody. So it really does take you even beyond just finding that job.
Yeah. Networking is critical, right?
Yeah.
I think like a lot of people are like, oh, my resume is that your resume is just a very small sliver of who you are. And but people know your character and you to get to know people, and networking is really key. And maintaining a good network is also key as well. So yeah, yeah. What was the hardest part of the job search process for you?
Networking. Just getting comfortable with networking. I kind of viewed it as this Machiavellian thing where, like, hey, what can you do for me? And it's really not that way at all. And that's another thing that the career coach helped me with. It's like it's just a conversation. Like, you can go into it telling people, look, I'm not asking you to find a job for me. I'm just trying to make some connections. I'm, looking for what's next in my career, going back to that idea that you're in career transition. So, like, I'm looking at options, and I'd love to pick your brain. And just approaching it that way, and also thinking about the fact that it is a two-way conversation, and there may be something you can do for that person. Because I would always end the conversations with, hey, is there anything I can do for you? And at that moment where I was feeling that hit to my worth, um, it was great when people said yes. And I was surprised how many times somebody would say, hey, yeah, I know you've got an English background. Could you take a look at this, product slick I just wrote and tell me if it makes sense? Or just little things like that where I felt good helping them. And I didn't feel like I'm a beggar out there trying to get people to find me a job.
Right. Yeah, yeah. That's tough because as I've gone through this, I've had the opportunity over the last few weeks to just speak to a lot of people. I've been connected with people I don't even know. Like they've just reached out. You have a minute for a conversation, and I've had some wonderful conversations. And I've had so many people say, "Oh, how do you connect with so and so, so and so?" And so I have all these invitations out. I'm getting back to all of you as I can. So, but it has opened up so many two-way conversations, and I can't tell you how uplifting that has been. Just like, yeah, you're being able to get there, talk to people, and they're asking you for advice or thing on things, and
Yes.
does establish your, like, yeah, I am contributing. I'm doing something well. Um, how did this growth mindset really help you during some of the most challenging parts of the job search process?
Yeah, I mean, like I was saying earlier, I'm kind of risk averse, and sometimes I don't go outside my comfort zone. And like with the networking thing, I did some stuff that seemed like very nervy to me, like that I wouldn't have done before. For example, my job I'm in now, which I love, um, I looked up when I saw this job, I looked on LinkedIn and I thought, okay, is anybody I know connected to somebody in HR at this place? And here, this woman who had in one of these job seekers groups said, hey, I love connecting people. She was connected to the head of HR for the company where I work now, the guy who's now my boss. And so I said, I went to her, I hardly knew her, and I sent her a message and said, hey, do you know this person? Can you connect me to them? And she did. And so I was able to directly email him, and I used that consultative approach like, hey, I see you have a job for this. I can help you solve this if you're interested in talking more. And, I had a phone interview by the end of the week.
Wow.
And that's something I never would have done before. And so it felt good to push myself out of my comfort zone and try something. And not only that, but to see it pay off was even greater.
Yeah, yeah. How did you change your point of view? Because I think a lot of people don't see things outside of their little box that they're in, right? It's like, Oh, it's a kind of like what you were thinking, right? How you gotta go schmooze people and all that kind of stuff, and that's not really networking, right? Like, that's Hollywood's version of
Yeah.
networking, uh, but it takes a lot of vulnerability to put yourself out there, right? And you had to overcome that. Like, what was the thing that made you change to do that?
Gosh, I don't know if there was any one thing. I mean, I think it was a combination of just the circumstance and knowing that what I was used to wasn't working.
Mm,
So there's, that saying that insanity is trying the same thing again and expecting different results. So it's like, well, I need to try something new. And what do I have to lose at this in this situation? Nothing. I'm going to just do it and see what happens. So yeah, there was vulnerability and I remember feeling kind of embarrassed like when he responded to me, I was kind of embarrassed like, oh, what's he gonna think? Like I'm directly emailing him and he
yeah,
doesn't even know me. But I mean, he wanted to talk to me, so it worked out.
yeah,
And even if he hadn't, I could say that I tried that. And
yeah,
I could see that I did make that connection. And some of those connections come back later.
yeah. When you experience, like, that reply back and
Mhm.
the success of, like, putting yourself out there, did that, like, embolden you to, like, I can do this, like, like, I'm gonna take that next step and just push on forward,
Mhm.
because I think it's scary for a lot of people and they feel like, they've been getting these rejection emails and all this kind of stuff, right? Like, now you're really in a very personal way reaching out to the
Yeah.
person that's hiring, right? That's a big part of that, and so when it came back and you were like, this is great, what did that do for just your entire, like, your mental state and your emotional state as well?
Yeah, it was exciting. I mean, I was very interested in the role and finding out more about it. And, it helped me to go into the interview, I think, with a different mindset too, because this interview was probably the most consultative one I've ever had on both sides. It
Huh?
lasted a long time and we talked very specifically about what the organization was trying to do and what I had done before that that experience that I could bring and help with things and I think it gave both me and the interviewer confidence to move to the next step.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's awesome that you took something that was seems really daunting, right? You made it a positive experience, and I think that's, I how people view things, rather than, oh, I tried this, it didn't work, right? And they get down and failure on themselves, right? Beat themselves up. But I think you're really looking at things as opportunities, growth
Mhm.
opportunities, ways to continue to learn from that and grow, and just make it a positive experience all around, which I think is fantastic. I've been going through this journey myself, loving it, and I'm finding out how much I have to grow still. So I'm learning that. But what's one tip, or one piece of advice that you'd give to someone who's just starting to network after a layoff? What would be the advice that you would share with them?
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing I tell people is you're going to come out of the other side of this, that there's an end in sight and it doesn't feel like it when you're in it. And if you let that feeling pull you down, you're not going to have the confidence or the inspiration to try something new and to learn something new. So I would say, if you are networking, start small and start with people you're comfortable with. Like,
Mm,
look at your first group, people you've worked with before and had a good relationship with, people who are even friends. Reach out to them first. And from there, kind of widen that circle and keep kind of pushing yourself out a little farther and a little farther. And
yeah,
you'll be surprised just how kind and open most people are. I mean, I can't think of anybody. Maybe I was just lucky, but I can't think of anybody I talked to who was a jerk or like, why are you calling me? I mean, they were all super nice. And so now if anybody comes to me, I will always talk to them. It's like I'm not turning anybody away because I know how that felt.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a great conversation with someone a couple weeks ago. And again, it was a new person I was connected with through another person. And we just had a conversation. And one thing they were saying is like people want to help. And we
Mhm.
don't realize it, right? Like we're afraid to raise our hand because it makes us vulnerable, but people really want to help. And so I think just, taking those steps to grow and to move outside, you'll find that there's a bigger support network than what
Mhm.
you realize,
Yeah.
right? And absolutely. All right. So we're going to wrap things up here. One thing I do want to know is like any like final advice or words of encouragement that you want to give to anyone who's currently going through this career transition.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I'll say it again, like, you will find something. You will.
Yeah.
So just know that. But also, as weird as it sounds, this is a great opportunity. You've got a blank slate. And we don't get that too often in life. So you
Mm,
can kind of chart your path more at this moment than in other job searches you might have experienced before. And there's something freeing about that.
there is. And what I loved about your presentation and getting through, those three mindset shifts, right, to get there is like I found like one of the things is you are applying your best self skills and stuff to the job that would best fit who you are,
Mhm.
and I think that gets you out of the just settling mode and the desperation mode, right? And you find yourself in a place where you're contributing in a way that's meaningful.
Mhm.
So I like that, right? And I get like not everybody's in the position to take the time and go through that, but if you can, the value that it creates is just tremendous, because
Mhm.
then you're like, now it's something you want to do, not
Yes.
that you have to do.
Yep.
Yeah, awesome. So thank you, Jenny, for sharing with us today. I loved your story, your journey, and I know I know that just connecting with you during my process as well has been extremely encouraging as well. So anyone who's listening and they want to learn more, Jenny created this one pager here that kind of sums up her presentation that she has done, and it's the three mindset shifts to transform your job search. And we'll have that available to download. And so you'll see it in the show notes below. And so remember that no matter where you are in your career, one, you have value, there are growth opportunities everywhere if you're willing to shift your mindset. So thank you for joining, Jenny. Greatly appreciate the time. It's such a joy to always spend time with you and chat. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Mario. Likewise, it's been great talking to you.
Awesome. Thank you. We'll catch you all later on the next episode sometime soon.